Okay, so let's go to let's just continue where we were left off yesterday in the Rav Shulchan Aruch. That we saw two different opinions. One opinion is that gambling by playing dice or playing cards and stuff like that is usher for a Jew to play with another Jew, but it's permitted for a Jew to play with a non-Jew. And the reason why such a distinction is drawn is because it's only a rabbinical form of gezel. It's not a real form of gezel because the people are putting down their money willingly. But the rabbi said that there's a certain reluctance because no one really thinks that they're going to, no one really wants to lose. So because people don't want to lose, they only reluctantly give up their money when they lose the hand or they lose the game. And then he said, "V'yesh omrim shahamasachikim Yisrael kimasachikim hakusi ve'in bo mishum gezel." He says, but there are those who say that even gambling with a fellow Jew is not going to be usher, but even so, there's a prohibition involved, as is contained in Orach Chaim, and we'll see what that is. And then he writes the next statement that the Rav Shulchan Aruch writes is, "Ushnayim shehimru zeh im zeh." If two people wager with each other. Now, this term shehimru is found in the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos on Daf Lamed Aleph, which is the famous Gemara about two Jews who made a wager between themselves to see if they could get Hillel upset. Remember that Gemara where one of them said, why are just silly questions they asked him, and they called him out while he was washing his hair and taking a bath on Erev Shabbos. And each time he had to put on his robe and come out, and they would ask him silly questions like, why do Africans have wide feet? Silly questions. And then after the third time, the guy who bet 400 zuz to his friend that he could upset Hillel, the guy says, your forbearance, Hillel, has made me lose 400 zuz. And so Hillel's response to him, better that you should lose 400 and another 400, and that Hillel should never lose his temper. So that was the story over there. But so if two people make wagers with each other, they make bets with each other. Dinam kimasachkim bekuvia. That's the same thing as playing dice or playing poker. Umikol makom imlo hishlish hamaos. But if they don't put the money down, they just make a gentleman's bet. Well, that's not really. I mean, they make a wager for money, but they don't actually put the money down. Rashai lachzorbo, ele imkain, hischayev litain l'tzedaka. Then on a bet where no money was put down in escrow, each party is allowed to go back on the bet, which is a surprising statement, unless the bet was a pledge to tzedakah, where the wager was, if I'm right, you have to give $100 to my favorite charity, and if you're right, then I have to give $100 to your favorite charity. So in that situation, you're not allowed to go back because sha'ami rasam legavoa kimisira lahejot ve'enam yicholam lachzor b'hem. Because once you make a statement to pledge to charity, you're never allowed to go back on it. Okay, so we're going to see some of the details on this, and we'll try to get some clarity. So let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov now, because this is a very relevant discussion. So going back to Mesachakim Bekuvia, people who play dice. Hainu Shazarkim, so he says, Hainu Shazarkim Kuvia, V'im hu nofel al tzad mesuyam shehuskam beinayim azocha ha'echad b'sikum maos. It's like dice. You throw these cubes, and if it lands on a certain side, then that they've designated, then the guy who said that number wins the pot. Gezel b'divreihem. It's a form of rabbinic theft. Ba'af delo havi asmachta. And even though there's a sincere commitment to forfeit the money, and it's not like just making some kind of idle statement, which is what an asmachta is. Mikol makom kevin she'ein chaver makn lo b'kinyan gomer eladei schok b'hitul hareza aser midivrei. But it's not a real transaction that's going on. You're not. There's no quid pro quo that is being acquired through the gambling effort. It's only a way of making money through a game and not through kind of a transactional profiting, and therefore it's rabbinically usher. And it's important to know, therefore, that if a person does gamble and he makes money, even according to the first opinion that says that it's usher, we don't force you to pay it back. It's just that lechatchila you're not allowed to do it. And afal pisha beratzon haba'olim lakach, and even though you acquired this money legally through the consent of everyone, nonetheless, it is still usher midivrei. Just got one more fly. I got him. I got the rest of them. Anyway, so va'afilu hamaos munachim al hadaf, and this is true even if the money, even if there's cash laid out on the table that everyone had to put into the kitty, nami usr, it's also usr. It's not only usr if the guy has to pull it out of his pocket after he loses, but even if they already put the money in the center of the table, it's still going to be usr. And then he writes, but if you play with a Gentile, there's no prohibition. The afagav de kaimelan de gezel akum aser kedel sif aleph shani hacha denosin lo midaitu v'chai gavna lo asri. He says, because even though we know that there's no distinction in the laws of stealing between Jews and non-Jews, since this is only a rabbinical ordinance that you're not supposed to gamble and it's tantamount to stealing rabbinically, they did not extend that to non-Jews. So therefore, if you're at a gambling table in Vegas and everyone is a non-Jew, so then that's certainly okay according to everybody. It's, in other words, not okay. We're just saying that it's not gezel, right? Ve'ein bo mishum gezel. And so then we go on to the second opinion. V'yesh omrim shahamasachik im yisrael kimasachik im hakusi ve'ein bo mishum gezel. So the second opinion is that gambling with a fellow Jew is no different from gambling with a Gentile, and there's no prohibition of gezel. And he says, and this is the prevailing custom. The prevailing custom is for people to be permissive to gamble. And as the Ramah writes in the Shulchan Aruch, a person does not become disqualified as a witness by simply gambling, unless, and this is a big unless that's his primary occupation. If the way that you make your living is you're a professional poker player, and that's how you make a living, so then you're pasul le'edus, because you're a what's the word I'm looking for? You're a hustler. Right, you're a hustler. You go to the pool halls, and you go to and you're a ringer, and you pretend like you don't know how to play the game. Like, so you throw the first game or two, and then you clean up for the rest of the night. Or you're a professional poker player, and you're much more skilled than everyone else, and that makes pasul le'edus, because the way that you make your living is by exploiting people's weaknesses, gambling. Okay. Now, the Chol Zeh Midina. Now, this is the strict letter of the law that technically according to the second opinion, it is permitted to gamble as long as it's not your primary occupation, but you do it recreationally. And of course, anyone who's been to Vegas or to Atlantic City knows that people gamble recreationally all the time. Avol l'maisa, But as far as halacha l'maisa, whether this is an appropriate thing to do, shomer nafsho yirchak mizeh, that anyone who's concerned about the health of their soul should stay away from this kind of activity as a general rule. Afilu l'sachek b'limos, even to gamble without money, just to play games. Ba'ayin b'likutim, and as we'll see in the likutim, we'll see some cases. B'da od the gamla de yazud the svirle de'in b'kuvya mishum gezel. He says, and even you should know further that according to this opinion, that there's no law of theft when you gamble, when you play dice. That's only when everyone has put out their money on the table. In other words, because everyone's relinquished their money and has already expressed a willingness to lose their money. He says, but let's say they were gambling without putting down any money, but just based on saying, okay, you'll pay at the end of the evening. He says, in there, halachically, whoever lost and didn't put down money cannot be forced to pay. In other words, you can't take the guy to Beis Din and say that we were gambling one night and he lost a big hand, and we trusted him that he would pay if he lost, but he'd never paid. There, halachically, you're not chayiv to pay if you didn't put down the money in advance. I guess that's why it's a good idea when you're playing poker to make sure everyone puts money in the kitty in advance, and that's how the custom got started to do that, because people probably had great regret after, if they lost a hand, they figured, how could I lose a hand? I've got a full house, not realizing the other guy had a flush, right? So, and then, it's very, very upsetting. You have this amazing hand, and then you lose out to a guy who's got an even more amazing hand you never really planned on losing. That's why you bet so much money. So that's how the minhag became, that everyone puts down money out in the kitty, because otherwise people would not want to pay. So halachically, you're not obligated to pay, is what basically he's saying. He says, "Mikol makom kevin dedvarim ba'almehein lo nikna ba'amani." He says there's no transactional commitment when you don't put money out on the table in advance. Okay, now obviously, if you don't pay, you said you were going to, there may be other prohibitions involved by not paying, by not keeping your word, and so forth and so on. But the point is that he says ve'im asu kinyan mahani. But if they make a kinyan, let's say they shake hands in advance, promise you're going to pay, they shake on it, so that's a form of kinyan. Or they use a chalipin handkerchief or some other kind of method of kinyan, so then that is legally binding. And furthermore, we said that if two people make bets with each other, that's tantamount to playing dice. Rod Salomar shehisarvu b'neihem, mashakasav the dinam kemasachim b'kuva. Bekuvia wrote Salomar diladeya rishana yesh bo gezel medivrayim kibin shekona ze bechinam kenal u'be'ashniya shari vein bo gezel klal. Meaning that if people make wagers with each other, so then according to the first opinion it's usher because of rabbinic theft, and according to the second opinion there's no gezel involved. Imlo hishlish hamos rashai lachzor bo. But if they make a bet and they don't put the money down, then the losing party is allowed to legally renege. Avalim toka kapo eno rashai lachzor the dekias kaf mahani afilu basmachta. But if they already shook hands on it, then you're not allowed to go back on a bet, because a handshake is tantamount to a kinyan, a complete commitment. Okay. Ba'ainu biurim divrei maslo rishayim b'shem hataz dahainu dafka b'davar shelo asid kigon imiyah kain olo aval b'davar shelo avar ein ze ela shichucha v'tos. And furthermore, we prove in our commentary in the biurim that according to the commentary of the Taz, the only time that you're obligated to pay a bet when you lose it is if you bet on something that's going to or not going to happen in the future. like you bet on a game, right? You bet on a football game. Who's going to win the football game? Okay. And if you lose, so then if you haven't put money down, then you're allowed to go back legally on the bet, unless there was a handshake. If there is a handshake, or if there's another kind of legal commitment that is made, let's say you send an email stating I promise to pay you such and such amount, that might have the status of a shtar, right? Because it's legally upholdable in a court of law. So then you will have to pay. But he says that's only if it's on something that will or will not transpire in the future. But let's say a guy bets on something that has already happened. Like for example, you want to bet on who won the World Series in 1959, and you have on Shabbos you're arguing who won the World Series in 1959. And this guy says it was the Yankees, and the other guy says it was the Reds. And there's a big dispute between the two of you, and you get so heated at the Shabbos table, the guy says, I know for sure that it was the Yankees who won the World Series in 1959. And if you want, I'll bet you $100. And the guy says, deal. We'll check after Shabbos. We'll see who's right. Right? So in that situation, that's not a legal bet. Because there are guys just simply making a mistake. And so, let's see, which one is that? Let's see, Rishayim. Here, it's over here. He quotes the Taz that she'im himru ze'ezeh shezeh omer shekein hadavar zeh omer kain the potter de liba onso. In that situation, the person who made the mistake is potter because he's simply making a memory error. And that's the way he comes out, is that there's more reason to be lenient to not require him to pay the bet in a situation where he's talking about the past, not talking about the future. Okay, so Rashai Lachzor Bo, you're allowed to go back on a wager as long as there was no kinyan. Da'af de lo havi asmachta, because there's no transactional commitment that's made just by saying I wager, I accept a wager. Because even when it comes to playing dice or poker, if the money is not put in the kitty, then technically either party is allowed to renege. But if they make a kinyan or they do a handshake, even if the money was not put down, then you're not allowed to go back. And again, we also said that that's only if there's a wager between them personally. But if the wager is to give money to charity, then you're not allowed to renege, even if there was no handshake. Shami Rasim Lagavo, because when you make a commitment for charity, it's like promising something to God, and even a verbal commitment is sufficient. He says, but if you only made a mental commitment that if you win this wager, you'll give money to tzedakah, in our biurim, we clarify that you're not obligated. And finally, when you make a verbal commitment to tzedakah, it's like having. By the way, we learned this before, and I think a few months ago. I don't remember exactly in which context, but we said that making a pledge to tzedakah makes you obligated halachically to pay. It's almost like you made a kinyan with the tzedakah. Wrote Salomar kimisira salaheja b'makom demo elas misira. He says when a transaction is consummated by giving over the goods, so too it's a verbal commitment to tzedakah has the same power. He says there are those who disagree with the Rav Shulchan Aruch, and they say that when you make a wager Even if the stakes are to give to charity, it's not a legally binding wager because there was no kinyan made. But avoladina kaimelan kamosha kasav harav kan. But lamaisa we paskin like this Rav Shulchan Aruch. Umikol makom yachol lishal al nidra afilu shalom midocha. But a person can always get a hataras nadarim if he wants to, which means he can get an annulment of his pledge by going to a beis din and basically saying he has tremendous remorse on having made this pledge because he never thought that he would lose, and be obligated to make good on the pledge. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. We also saw in the parentheses over here that he quotes from Siman Shin Chaf Bet. Second, Chaf Bet is in Hilchos Shabbos, where it talks a little bit about what he's referring to over here. Let's see. To the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Chaf Bet talks about making lots, taking lots on Shabbos, doing a lottery on Shabbos, and basically, let's say, are you allowed to draw straws on Shabbos? And they play a game at the table of drawing straws and say whoever gets the long straw will get an extra piece of cake for dessert. That's really what the Shulchan Aruch is talking about. And it says halachically it's legal to do that on Shabbos. He says you're allowed to do that with your family members, as long as all of the pieces are the same and you're doing it in order to be able to make sure that everyone, that no one is jealous. In other words, here, if you want to take a look, what we'll do is we'll take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. Let me just bring it up here for a second. Here. Okay, Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim. Shin Chaf Bet, Sif Vav. Okay, here we go. Share. Okay. So the halacha is over here. Hamachalek livnei veito manot b'Shabbat. If a person is giving out portions by lottery in his own household, so he says, so that is going to be permitted. I'm just going to bring up the Mishnah Berurah over here for just a second. Yachol lahatil gorel. He's allowed to make a lottery when he's giving out, let's say, pieces of pie or pieces of cake for dessert. He can make a lottery and say, Lamishi yatsa gorel ploni yachel ploni shalo. Whoever wins the lottery, let's draw straws, and whoever wins the lottery will get the first piece of cake. So that's totally okay as a game with your family members. V'hu sheyihiyu chalakim shavim. But that's provided that all of the pieces of pie are the same size. Okay? Now, why is that required? So, as the Mishnah Berurah writes, "The bazeh in shach shum iser shel schikas kuvia kaven she'ein mistaker al yidei hagoral." He says, because when all the pieces of pie are equivalent, all you're doing is playing a game of who gets the next piece. But if you were to play a game by drawing straws and saying that whoever wins the straw gets the bigger piece, he says then it's going to be a problem of misachek bekuvia because you're causing people to profit off of gambling. Which is a very interesting idea. He says be'enam osim elakidei lahashvosam shelo lahatil kina b'neihem. And the point of this game is that you want everyone to get an equal share, but you also don't want people to become jealous. How come he got first? How come he got second? So that's the reason why it's okay as long as all the pieces are the same. Aval im acherim aser, but you're not even allowed to play this game with other people. And the reason why you're not allowed to play this game with other people is because since the people of your household are not going to begrudge each other if one piece is slightly bigger than the other. And therefore, it's totally okay as long as the pieces are approximately equivalent. You can draw lots to see, okay, you get to choose the next piece because all the pieces are the same. And you're just basically doing it so that people are not going to fight in your house. But if there are people who are not related, and a guy splits up a pie into 6 pieces and they're taking lots who's going to get the next piece. So you're not allowed to draw lots on that. And the reason is because they may come to measure. A guy may say, hey, you're taking a bigger piece than you're entitled to, and they may cause them to measure things on Shabbos, and measuring on Shabbos is prohibited. Avolite mana gedola keneged mana ketano lahatil goral alehem afilu bivnei besa uvechol aser mishum kovia. But what is aser even with members of your own household as a game is if you have 2 pieces of pie, one is big and one is small, and you do a lottery or you draw straws in order to see who's going to get the big piece, who's going to get the small piece, that you're not allowed to do even with your own family members, even when it's not Shabbos. Why? Because of the prohibition of kuvia. And what is the prohibition of kuvia? So the Mishnah Berurah says as follows: Hainu demi sheyizke begorel yitol hagedola umishi yizchai yitol haketana ubichlal schikas kuvia mamish. He says that the deal is whoever wins by drawing the big straw, he gets to take the big piece, and whoever gets the small straw gets the small piece. He says that's going to be prohibited even with family members, because that's like playing dice. And he writes, Kuvya humash mesachekin be'etzim. He says that's when they play with cubes of wood, and they, like we've described before. The kuvya who avak gezel midivrehem, and it is considered to be a minor form of theft rabbinically. She'ein daito lahaknosu b'kinyan gamor ulahachi aser, because the person really doesn't mean to relinquish his money or relinquish the larger portion with a full heart, and therefore it's a type of false giving up of your money. And that's why it's prohibited even during the week. And even though a guy, the father of the household, playing with his kids or playing with the other members of his household, is not really stealing because he owns everything in the house anyway. So like the pie belongs to him. So why should that be a problem? Mikol makom asr dilma asi lisruche bekuvia im acherim. But nonetheless, the reason why it's prohibited even with your own family members is still going to be usher, because it could cause you to have a taste for gambling, which will lead you to become a gambling addict, you'll become addicted to gambling. And so even to play a game in your own household, to draw straws or to do a lottery is going to be usher according to this opinion, because it's going to cause you to want to do it with other people. And that seems to be what the Rav Shulchan Aruch was making reference to. But then the Shulchan Aruch writes, "V'yesh omrim de'im banavu v'nei beso muter lahatil gorel, afilu almana gedola keneged mana ketana, mipnei she'ein makpidim." But some say that it's not a problem to draw lots with the members of your household, because at the end of the day, everyone loves each other, and it's not like people are going to be so upset because it's the family members, and so it's not such a big deal to do it with the members of your own family. And like the Mishnah Berurah says, "Shaharei hu nosein lahem hakol mishalo." He says, because after all, if I'm the balabayit and I'm, deciding who gets the big piece and who gets the small piece, it's all mine anyway. Below shayach shash the mida umishkal. So there's no concern that they're going to demand a measurement. The gamkuvia ein kan, and there's no real gambling because no one's relinquishing that which belongs to them. It all belongs to the balabayas who's running the lottery. He says, but if the kids are, let's say, playing games and they're gambling with their own possessions, so then they're not allowed to gamble. He says, and then the Ramah writes, you're not allowed to have a lottery on Shabbos, even via a non-Jew running the lottery. And the Mishnah Berurah writes, "Hainu imhu lechalek eza davar," like to run like a raffle. You're not supposed to do on Shabbos. The idea is whoever wins the raffle wins a certain prize. And it's he says, and it's usher, even if, because it's late, we'll finish this Mishnah Berurah tomorrow, where he talks about doing a raffle on Shabbos or doing a lottery on Shabbos. Apparently, there's a separate isser, because it looks like some kind of transactional activity is being done on Shabbos. Okay, we'll continue.
Well, Rabbi, I'm wondering about Simchas Torah as well.
Yeah, that's not really a raffle though. It's an auction. Okay.
Yeah, it depends how it's done.
Yeah.